Our guest today is the Executive Director of the Illinois Housing Development Authority. She was appointed to this position by Governor Patrick Quinn 10 months ago. Prior to this appointment, our guest today served as the authority's general counsel and acted as Assistant Executive Director. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Finance from DePaul University and her law degree from Loyola University right here in Chicago. On a personal note, it's my opinion that our guest today is one of the nicest people in government. And when you work with government every day, that gets you about 85% to the goal line. So I thank her for that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director of the Illinois Housing Development Authority, Mary Kenney. Mary?
I'm going to speak at the City Club more often, Jay. Thank you for that nice introduction. I wanted to take a couple minutes to just acknowledge a couple of people myself. First of all, I want to acknowledge some of my coworkers that are over at tables 15 and 16 here today. You're going to hear a little more later, but I personally believe there's no harder working group of people in government than the people sitting at those two tables and the people back at my office. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the staff. I do it a lot back at the office, but it's nice to be able to do it publicly for a change, so thank you. I also have a couple of board members here today, Mr. William Malaris, and of course our chairman, Terry Newman, who Mr. Doherty already acknowledged. I'm also a little biased about this, but I think that we actually have the best board in state government. We've had a really tumultuous time in our industry, and our board, and particularly our chairman, who's been our leader for 8 years now, has done just a tremendous time in guiding us through a really difficult time. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also at that table is Mark Harris, the governor's deputy chief of staff, who I have worked extremely closely with over the last 10 months. And he is really, you know, in addition to our agency, he balances a lot of agencies. And so I'm not quite sure how he does it. I think even with the initiatives that we've had over the last year, it was enough to keep any one person busy. But Governor Quinn is certainly lucky to have him. Mark Harris. And finally, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of people that are here today. I have big shoes to fill. Jim Kiley, who was the executive director at IDA under Jim Thompson, and Peter Lennon, who was the assistant executive director at IDA, and actually gave me one of my first jobs. Peter Lennon hired me in the late 1980s as a secretary. Can I say that? It's like a bad word today, but that's what they called them back then, and that's what I was. I was working on my undergraduate degree at DePaul University at the time, and Peter was nice enough to give me a job. And I went on to law school and did some other things, worked at a law firm for a number of years. Before, there's something about the agency, though, that always kind of stuck with me, and when I got the opportunity to return in 2000 as the agency's general counsel, I jumped at it. So thank you, Peter Lennon, because you somewhat changed the trajectory of my life by that hire so many years ago. You know, to me, the work of IDA is deeply important, and not because I believe that everybody is entitled to a decent and safe place to live, although I do. But because I believe our housing policy affects not just the people who access subsidized housing, but also our society as a whole. I think that our housing policies have almost as much to do with how a child is educated or the health care they receive as the actual policies that govern these issues directly. When you think about it, where you live affects almost every aspect of your life, whether it's jobs and transportation, or whether it's healthcare and education. And as the recent discussions on food deserts evidence, it can even affect the food that you eat. There really has been a dearth of research on the impact of housing in these other areas of social policy, and I just want to take a minute to compliment the MacArthur Foundation here in Chicago for its work on this issue. The foundation recently funded a $25 million research initiative to study the effects that investments in affordable housing have on social and economic outcomes beyond shelter. As someone who's watched these outcomes firsthand, housing to me has always been about more than shelter. In many ways, the current housing crisis has brought that home, no pun intended, in a way that no study ever could. Watching middle-class families stripped from their homes, children evicted, and belongings shed to the curb was really more than many Americans could take. Even the sheriff halted evictions to take a look at the process. And it seems clear that the true cost to our society as a result of the housing crisis is not going to be measured in just lost property values, but also in the cost of displacing families from their neighbors, children from their schools, and citizens from their communities. And I know that the foreclosure crisis is really the topic on everyone's mind, and I'm going to talk about that and the effect and the efforts of the governor and my agency in that regard. But first, I want to talk a bit about IDA and the work that we do. I think when most people hear the words affordable housing, they think of public housing projects. And that was never our model, long before the CHA's plan for transformation. And for almost 50 years now, my agency has been quietly constructing affordable housing in partnership with the private sector, adopting a mixed income model in economically integrated communities around the state. IDA began as a bonding authority in the 1960s with a very clear and concise mission to create and preserve affordable housing. Back then, it was a very small agency with less than a dozen employees and very few assets. It was created and remains an entity separate from the state, which means that we do not rely on tax dollars, and we have to earn revenue in order to survive, just like any other company. Today, IDA has over $2.5 billion in assets, 260 employees, and its own credit rating, most recently rated A+ by S&P. This means that it can function in the capital markets without any reliance on the state balance sheet. And since 1967, IDA has financed over 219,000 units of affordable rental housing, comprising nearly 1,800 developments in every single county of the state. We do this as a lender that sells tax-exempt bonds and other mortgage-backed securities in the capital markets to finance mortgages to private developers. We also oversee the federal low-income housing tax credit as well as 20 other state and federal housing programs. In effect, we act as the state's housing department, but we do it at no cost to the state. We help to construct affordable housing for low-income families and underserved populations, and we do it in almost every area of the state and city, including places you'd least expect it, like the Gold Coast and Lincoln Park. In fact, we're just finishing construction on a development down the street from here at 188 West Randolph in the Theater District, in the heart of Chicago's Theater District. And IDA provided over $90 million in financing and tax credit equity to help preserve a treasure of Chicago architecture and convert it to rental housing, 20% of which will be affordable. And we created 1,700 jobs in the process. We also serve people in populations that would otherwise have no chance at a decent home, whether it's a homeless shelter, a community for people suffering from mental illness, or a simple multifamily development available to people with more limited means. The effect can be life-altering. And we do it in a way that is seamless. I'd venture a guess that every single person in this room has walked by an IDA development at one point in time. You probably just didn't know it, and that's exactly the way it should be. The work of IDA is really more pervasive than even I knew. Just recently, our asset management department did a review of rental stock in the state of Illinois, and we discovered that IDA was responsible for 7% of all of the rental inventory in the state, which is 1 out of every 14 apartments in the state. It's really quite remarkable when you think about it. I believe that this area of our business is going to be even more vital in the coming years. We've lost a lot of our rental stock, especially family rental, to the condo conversions in the late 90s and early 2000s, And we have more families in the rental market as a result of the foreclosure crisis. So I really believe that the multifamily piece of what we do is going to be vital moving forward. In addition to our multifamily business, IDA also has a very robust single-family lending program, which began in the early 1980s. I think some of the guys at these tables were actually responsible for that. For many years, it was a vital resource to first-time home buyers who had trouble accessing credit to buy their first home. Later, because of the lack of discipline that was being exercised in the market, the program was all but shut down over the last couple of years. Our agency always served first-time home buyers who, by definition, were purchasing their first home and were often less sophisticated in the intricacies of a mortgage. As a result, we offered only a 30-year fixed-rate product. As the mortgage market accelerated and credit scores were loosened and more exotic loan products became the norm in the market, the demand for our loan product literally declined to zero. As an agency, we began to wonder whether it served a public purpose at all. I can't even begin to count the number of bankers that came through and told us we were behind the times and needed to change our financing methods and our loan products. But we held steady, convinced that our clients were best served by a straightforward 30-year fixed rate, even if the market had decided otherwise. Today, our program is thriving, still lending responsibly and providing liquidity to a market that sorely needs it. Which brings us to today. We're still doing the work that we've always done. Over the past 2 years, IDA has financed over 9,000 units of rental housing, representing over $1.6 billion in development, and creating almost 11,000 new jobs. In its single-family program, IDA's issued over $120 million in single-family debt last year, more than tripling its numbers from 2010, and the program continues to grow. These are really our core programs, and I believe that each will be vital to the state as it tries to recover from the cataclysmic upheaval within the market. As part of these programs, we continue to announce new programs. This past fall, when the governor asked us what we could do to help our soldiers returning from Afghanistan and Iraq, we created a program to help soldiers and their young families purchase a new home. In December, the governor announced the Welcome Home Heroes program, which provides the most lucrative financing package ever made available by my agency. It includes a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, currently at 3 3/4%, $10,000 in down payment assistance, and a federal tax credit worth up to $20,000 over the life of the loan. The program will help over 1,000 men and women who have served their country purchase their first home. I agree, and I have to say that's something I feel our governor feels really strongly about. He is very interested in the welfare of our soldiers, and it's very heartening to see someone in the governor's office who really shares, I think, the core beliefs of myself and my agency, and I know our chairman and the people that work there. So it's nice to work for Governor Quinn. And so we continue to forge new ground in response to the housing crisis as well. But before I talk about these new initiatives, I want to stop a moment and talk about the numbers. And I want you to really consider the numbers, and not just as numbers, but as people. Over the past 4 years, almost 10 million foreclosures have been filed in the United States, and an estimated 3.5 million families have lost their homes. And the highest number of foreclosed homes is right here in Chicago. At the close of this year, RealtyTrac estimated that a full 100,000 homes in Chicago were either owned by banks or were in the process of being taken over. And the decline in home values is equally staggering. 30% of all homes sold in 2010 sold for less than their purchase price. 20% of Americans owe more on their mortgage than their home is worth. And again, the numbers here in Chicago are even worse. Nearly half of all homeowners in Chicago owe, on average, their property values have declined on average by 30%. And the recent numbers show the trend continuing. The Home Price Index, released by CoreLogic just this month, showed that home prices had declined nationally by 4.7% in 2011, but in the Chicago region, home prices had decreased by 11.8%. more than any other region in the United States. Experts estimate that nationally, homeowners have lost a full $7 trillion in equity. In some ways, for those of us not directly affected by the crisis, I think we've become desensitized to the constant barrage of data and what the numbers mean. And for those of you who haven't done it in a while, I encourage you to get in your car and go take a ride through our neighborhoods. Go to Humboldt Park or go through Chicago Lawn. Go visit some of the communities in our south suburbs where the vacancy rates are approaching 15%. And as you drive through those communities and you see those vacant homes, remember that every one of those homes represents a family. When I returned to IDA as its executive director last April, the governor made clear that helping struggling families and communities within our state was one of his #1 priorities. And with his help and vision, IDA has launched 5 new initiatives aimed at providing relief to at-risk homeowners and the communities they live in. I'm not going to be up here all afternoon, so I'm going to touch on all of these briefly, and you can ask me questions if you have specific questions on any of the programs afterwards. In September of last year, we launched the Hardest Hit program. This was a program funded through a $445 million grant from the U.S. Treasury, and it helps unemployed or underemployed homeowners get current on their mortgage and assistance making future mortgage payments. The program will eventually help more than 12,000 Illinois homeowners avoid foreclosure and stay in their homes. This particular program was a massive, massive undertaking. I can't stress that enough. I know Joe McGavin from my office is here, and I want to recognize him especially because he's worked so hard over the last 9 or 10 months. And to me, this program, there's no greater program. We've had staff members that have actually driven checks to the bank to help a homeowner avoid foreclosure because they were that far along in the process. And so our staff has just been so committed, and the amount of work that they've done in the last 12 months is really, I'm in awe. As a result of the program, we actually have a new office, 60 new employees, a new website, a network of over 65 counseling agencies, nearly 200 servicers, and a completely new infrastructure designed to process monthly payments on behalf of homeowners. Since the launch in September, we've received over 18,000 applications, and over 1,500 homeowners have already been assisted. We expect to add an additional 400 homeowners per month into the assistance, and we've actually had about, I think, 180 success stories of people that have already exited the program. They regained employment, they're paying their mortgage on their own. There are 180 people in Illinois that probably wouldn't still be in their homes but for the program. So it's a great program, and we're very happy to be a part of it. Another initiative is the Illinois Foreclosure Prevention Network, which the governor announced in his State of the State address this past February. This network is supported by a website, a toll-free number, regional and local counseling events, all of which are designed to connect homeowners to all available resources. The website and operators will provide information on various forms of relief available to homeowners, including free access to legal aid, information on upcoming events, and information on programs like the HHF program that I just described, and also federal programs such as HARP and HAMP, as well as the relief available under the state's recently announced settlement with the Big Five servicers. Perhaps most importantly, though, the network is going to provide free access to one-on-one counseling for homeowners that are in trouble. Counseling has actually been found to be a very, very effective tool in combating foreclosure. A recent study found that a homeowner who receives counseling is more than twice as likely to get a modification on their loan, and more than 67% is likely to stay current on their loan once they receive it. So it's actually been a great tool for us, as we found, in keeping people in their homes. I personally believe that establishing and branding this network may be one of the single most important factors in stemming the flow of foreclosures in Illinois. There's a significant amount of confusion about available options and an extreme amount of distrust. I had to tell you that when I returned to IDA, shortly after I returned to IDA, we launched a loan modification program for our own borrowers. And once the board had passed on the final terms, we decided to send a letter to all of our borrowers who were in default to try to get them to modify their loans so that we could help them. And we sent out these letters, and so we got no response. And so we decided we would send postcards asking them to contact us. And when we got no response to that, we sent the postcards again. And I met with my staff and I said, I don't understand. You know, we're trying to keep people in their homes. Why won't they call us back? And so we actually got on the telephone and we called our borrowers that were in default and said, come in, we want to modify your loan. And the borrowers were hanging up on us. It was like mind-boggling to us. We simply could not have imagined the level of distrust that had developed between homeowners and their lenders. And as we learned, too many had been victims of mortgage scams by companies collecting fees for assistance that never came. So therefore, as crazy as it sounds, I think even more than any financial assistance, establishing and branding this network as a safe and reliable resource to Illinois homeowners will be one of the most important things we do over the next year. In July, the IDA board approved an innovative new program known as the Mortgage Resolution Fund. Using funds from the U.S. Treasury under the HHF program and working with a myriad of private partners, some of whom are here today, Mercy Portfolio is here, IDA financed a fund which will essentially act as a hedge fund, purchasing defaulted mortgages on the open market and modifying these mortgages in an effort to keep existing homeowners in place. If it sounds a bit complicated, that's because it is. But in simple terms, the program works like this. The fund will purchase mortgages at 40 to 60 cents on the dollar, which is basically the going rate for a defaulted mortgage in the market today. I promised myself I wasn't going to editorialize, but I am. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I was so surprised when I learned that you could purchase a defaulted mortgage for 40 or 60 cents in the market. As somebody who works in the housing industry and was trying so desperately to get homeowners these modifications into products that they could afford, I was just flabbergasted to find that banks were selling these mortgages at 40 or 60 cents on the dollar, when at the same time, they wouldn't modify the loan for the homeowner. It was just so breathtakingly amazing to me. But in any event, I guess that's a story for another day, and I'm sorry. Anyway, let's say you have a mortgage of $100,000. So the fund purchases it for $50,000. Then an underwriter will work with the homeowner to see what the homeowner can afford to pay. And ultimately, the principal on the loan may be written down to say $75,000 or $80,000 to a point that the homeowner can afford it. And the program is going to include a complete underwriting of the new loan and debt counseling for the homeowner. And the hope is to revolve this fund by selling the modified, more secure loans so that the new loans can then be purchased. New loans can be purchased of other mortgagors in default. And so it's a very complicated, complex thing. I have to compliment Mercy because they've done a great job in terms of putting that together. And I have to compliment my board, who really took a step out with us to try a new and kind of innovative approach for a long-term solution for homeowners. I'm happy to report that just yesterday, the fund closed its first purchase of loans. It's a small buy to start, but we hope to have the program fully operational and purchasing more loans over the next 30 days. So. And finally, the last program, which is really a couple of programs built into a larger umbrella of programs. Also in his State of the State address this past February, the governor announced the Illinois Building Blocks program. And this really was something that I think the governor felt so strongly about. Having spent time in a lot of the neighborhoods, like I have, I think the governor saw firsthand the devastation in some of our neighborhoods and felt really strongly that the state had to step up and try to do something. So this program is a pilot program, and it's targeting 6 communities in South and West Cook County, and it's really a multifaceted and comprehensive approach aimed at helping communities along every phase of the foreclosure continuum. The program is going to employ a 3-pronged approach. First, it's going to provide support to struggling homeowners to keep them in their homes. Second, it's going to provide financing to developers willing to acquire and rehabilitate vacant properties. And finally, the program will provide special financing packages for potential homeowners willing to purchase a vacant property within one of the 6 communities. And so while framed as a pilot, we believe that this program will provide a replicable strategy to help stabilize neighborhoods, maintain the existing tax base, and preserve affordable housing stock. And the feedback that we've gotten from the communities that were selected for this pilot has really been overwhelming. As a matter of fact, there was a presentation to my board just this past month in which one of the city managers stepped up and started to give a presentation and basically, broke down, talking about how this program was really providing hope to a community that was just watching its neighborhoods slip away. So we're very proud of it, and we're anxious to get it fully launched. I'm happy to report that just today, again, the special homeowner financing package was officially launched in each of the six communities. And so this package, similar to the veterans package, although not quite as enhanced, will be available to any buyer who purchases a vacant home within each of the 6 communities. So that's kind of an overview, I guess, of the number of initiatives that the governor and my office has been working on over the last 6 months. I believe all these programs will go a long way in providing needed support to our communities and relief to struggling homeowners. To be sure, they've taken our agency in a new direction. As I kind of described earlier, we've always been an agency that's been behind the scenes, providing a service through the private sector. We're not a public-facing agency, as they say. Today, we are really front and center, working with homeowners directly and hand in hand with communities to respond to the foreclosure crisis. Someone asked me recently whether I thought all of our efforts were really going to change anything. And the short answer is I do. I'm not naive enough to think that IDA acting alone can fix the crisis, but I do believe that a lot of people acting together can make a huge difference. Just this past week, significantly, Fannie Mae announced an REO to rental project, and this too will help immensely. The county has a number of initiatives, some of which we're participating in, the Cook County Foreclosure Mediation Program, and taken together, the programs really can have a very large impact. But more than that, I think for those families that we help to stay in their homes, and for those kids that get to stay in their schools, I think it changes everything. Thank you.
We're going to have collect some questions. If you could write them on the cards that are on the table, if you could get them up here. One of the things, I'm going to editorialize for a second. It's very fashionable today to kind of talk about people that work in government, and they're kind of the target of everything. It's really refreshing to see somebody like this that you can see that cares and is really. I don't know what to say. I just think she was really good. So let's give her a great job. First question we have is from Larry Duty. Buildings are energy inefficient and utility costs escalate. What financing programs is IDA looking into to help homeowners and building owners to overcome this problem?
It's a good question. One of the first things I did when I came back, and Nikki Pecori here from IDA is actually spearheading this initiative, but we created a green committee to kind of look at that issue, to look at what our best practices and how we were incorporating them into our financing. The other thing that IDA is doing, really on the initiative of Governor Quinn, who's really created a great coordination, I think, between agencies, is we're working with the Office of DCEO, who oversees a lot of those programs, to figure out ways that we can actually merge their energy efficiency programs into our preservation product. So we're looking at a number of things, and I'm hopeful that there'll be some changes and some improvements, at least from our perspective.
If you have any more questions, send them up here. I do have a question. You talked about the banks that buy the or sell. Okay, I'm not going to say anything bad about the bankers, but they sell the mortgages for 40 to 60 cents on the dollar. Is that true around the country, or is it more prevalent here than other places?
I do think the rates are a little bit lower here in Chicago because we have or the state, I should say, because of the judicial foreclosure process, which takes a long time. And so the banks are willing to discount those even further because they're much more costly to actually acquire the asset. But for the most part, I think that you would find nationally maybe slightly higher rates, but yeah, the loans that are being sold in that range.
This is kind of like an energy. Is there a program that allows homeowners to curtail their costs, such as energy or conditions assessments programs, so that homeowners save money and use it to pay down their mortgages? I'm not sure. Is there a program in place that allows them to curtail the cost of their house so they can pay down their mortgages? I would guess it would be like a.
Go to the next one and I'll look at this.
With the demand for increasing along with the aging demographics, does IDA have a plan to encourage additional affordable senior housing? Let's see if I can translate this.
Yeah, I mean, we have a plan to, in fact, my agency, the federal tax credit program that my agency oversees has always been heavily weighted towards senior developments. More recently, we have kind of shifted priorities temporarily. I think are very focused on supportive housing and housing for the disabled. It's a very large initiative for the governor as we bring people out of institutions. So trying to serve many masters, but obviously with an aging population, senior housing is extremely important.
What is the status of funding for the trust fund?
I'm very happy to report that the state actually made a repayment to the trust fund just recently. I've had great conversations with the governor about, and we have a governor that is extremely committed to affordable housing, and just a couple of weeks ago, we received a payment to the trust fund. It's the first time in a long time, but we'll be reopening that fund shortly for applications.
Do we have any other questions? There are 3 court decrees moving people with disabilities out of large institutions. How is IDA helping to develop that housing?
So I actually considered putting that in my speech because in addition to all of the foreclosure things that we've been really focused on over the last 12 months, supportive housing is a key initiative on the part of the governor and on my agency. And we've been working very closely with our sister agencies around the state on the state's rebalancing efforts and promoting the construction of more affordable supportive housing so that we can move people out of institutions and into more community-based setting. And my agency has a goal of creating 10,000, I'm sorry, they're gonna kill me, 1,000 new units of affordable supportive housing over the next 2 years. So it's a really big initiative for us. It's something we're really focused on and have been spending a lot of time on. So thank you for your question.
And finally, thank you for your work and collaboration on the public-private partnership with the Illinois Facilities Fund and the Chase Bank to provide affordable housing options. What more can be done to encourage these partnerships?
So the question refers to a collaboration actually that IDA has with the Illinois Facilities Fund as well as Access Living. And what they are doing is they're going out and they're acquiring vacant properties in the current market, making them accessible to people with disabilities. And it's a rather large program. The state's made a $15 million commitment and recently Chase, and I think we have some, they're right there, made, I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think it's like $3 or $4 million private donation to advance the initiative. So it is a really good thing. And I think as we build on some of these more innovative programs, we will be able to try to attract more private investment. There's a lot of people here that could play a role in that, actually. I think it's a really important initiative for the state to bring people with disabilities into our communities. It's less costly to the state, and it's frankly, it's a better life, and it's where people should be. So we're focusing on creating new programs that can actually attract that type of investment.
You know, this is a private, or an aside. I'd like to thank David and Mary for the stuff that they always help us with Special Olympics. Jay Doherty and does a very lot with Special Olympics, but David's been very helpful, and so has Mary. So we appreciate the help that they give us for that, too.